On this episode of A State of Control, we talk about the 2018 edition of Crestron Masters, what it's all about, what attendees and instructors get, and we get an insider's view from diamond-level certified Crestron programmers. That and more on A State of Control.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
A State of Control.
A State of Control, episode 45, Meet the Gems.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by SDVOE, the platform for networked AV.
Welcome to A State of Control, an AVNation podcast that highlights the control, automation, and programming aspects of the audiovisual industry. My name is Steve Greenblatt. I'm your host. Thanks for joining us today. Today, we're going to talk about a special event that happened recently in the industry, and that was a collection of certified programmers across the country and even across the world congregated in Connecticut and were attending Crestron's Masters event. This is an annual event where Crestron shares some of the trends, some of the latest technology, and also uses certified programmers to help engage the community and to educate. And with me are a few of those attendees, and some even were instructors. But first and foremost, before we get started, I want to introduce my partner at State of Control, and his name is Uncle Richie. He is Rich Vergoza. How are you, Rich?
I'm doing great. And of course, as it happens on the West Coast, the minute we start recording, I've got background noise. So I'm going to give mellow West Coast greetings to everybody, and glad to see this collection of characters. It's sorry I missed seeing these guys, but I'm looking forward to hearing all of their information.
And we could affectionately call them gems because they're all diamond programmers. And sorry for the crazy joke, but first I'll introduce Dave Hatz. He's a familiar face on the show. How are you today, Dave?
Hey,
Dave's
doing awesome.
ABI
Thanks
Systems.
for having us all.
Thanks for joining us. Next, another familiar face, Bernard Morgan from ICS Plus. How are you, Bernard?
Doing well. Great to be back on the show.
Thanks for being here. And last but not least, if you've ever attended a Masters, you know him. His name is John Otteson from Crestron. How are you, John? Thanks for joining us.
Doing all right. Thanks for having me.
Well, glad you're here. So Crestron Masters is a big thing, and it is an event that almost can't be missed by Crestron programmers. If you're certified, I think it's safe to say that it almost trumps Infocom from the perspective of a programmer, as far as being able to be engaged and have some opportunity to learn and to also be involved in a community. So Rich, I'm going to start with you. From your perspective, and even as an outsider for somebody who may not have attended, how do you feel about the value that Crestron Masters provides, and what makes it so special?
Well, it's a multi-pronged answer, really. I mean, it's like with anything. I mean, obviously we have trade associations, and one of the things that I've always espoused is that, with our get-togethers, it's a perfect time for everybody to get together in the same room and to be able to exchange information and get in front of people and ask questions that you don't normally have or get information. Crestron Masters is a perfect example of that. It is one of the only times of the year that in North America, and then also obviously coming up in Europe, that people who are day in and day out programming these systems are able to get in front of engineers, instructors, and everybody who actually has an answer, can give you information that you may not have had before. But more importantly, the fraternity and sorority. Obviously, I love that there's men and women programmers that are at Masters, of people who are going through the same thing that you are day in and day out. And there's a lot to be said, because I think somebody said a couple of days ago, the odd thing about control system programming is, for the most part, it's a solitary act. And it's very easy to get isolated on an island. And even though you're working with other trades and other team members, it's still a pretty solitary act. You and a computer or whatever you're using, whether you're offsite or onsite. And so there's a lot to be said about being amongst people who are fighting the good fight along with you. And also, it's a concentrated blast. I mean, if you're ready to drink from the fire hose on any subject, that's available for you. And it's a true master's class. It's, there's no mistake why the phrase is used. It's an opportunity of people who are at, the top level of their skills to not have to worry about basics, but to really work on refining and pushing through to the next level. So again, it's you hear it from me, education. I'm always for it. So
Dave, from your perspective and somebody who's actually been involved over the years and been on both sides of the coin, what are some of the key takeaways that you find in going to an event like this?
Well, I think it's, Rich alluded to a lot of it, that it's, in my mind, it's almost 50-50. Half of it's the content and learning what's new, getting in front of those product managers, hearing about, this year, there were some trends that are new to the programmers. And if someone wasn't there, yeah, they're going to hear hearsay, they're going to read on the blogs, and they're going to pick up, little nuggets along the way. But to really be immersed and to have to have curriculum where you can choose the track you want. When registering, a programmer this year was given an option of, I forget the exact number, but there were 37 or something like that options of courses that you couldn't take all of them because there's not enough time, but you can pick what pieces of information, which courses are really meaningful to you in your role, whether it's something you're doing day in and day out or something you're not familiar with and you want to learn about and become familiar with. So, about half of the value that I always get is in that coursework, that learning what's new, learning, how to do it better from Crestron, from the Diamond community, from all the instructors. The other half of it, though, Rich talked about is, and I find huge value in, is that downtime. It's the time between sessions when you're collaborating. Everyone on this call, I've met through Crestron Masters. I was actually talking with someone while we were at the event, and I actually got my current job because of Crestron Masters, that I had formed a friendship with a programmer who worked for a firm who you would typically think of as a competitor to mine. And when the firm I worked for went out of business, the first call I got was from this individual. And it really opened my eyes to, if you think about it, in our industry, as I look at it, the sales reps are the ones that compete. They're the ones that are against each other, trying to bring the business into a company. Once that job has been landed, though, the programmers, the designers, those of us who are attending masters, we're not competitors. We're in the trenches together. We're all in there. And so to be able to share information, share the war stories, to sit down at a table with 8 other people and just start chit chat, and all of a sudden it turns to shop talk and somebody throws out, hey, have you ever seen this? Have you ever done this? And someone will pop up, oh yeah, I wasn't able to get it to work either. Or, oh yeah, I talked to so-and-so. Or, oh yeah, here's exactly what I did to fix it. Those can really be valuable to me as a programmer because I go back and can do my job more efficiently. I might be able to solve a problem in my role for my clients that I otherwise wouldn't have had an answer to. And so it's not just going to class. It's learning the complete skill set and the complete conversation around what we do. And it's something that, I hold really valuable, in my career and in this industry.
I think that's very, very well put, and I want to kind of go a little bit further with that. Bernard, from your perspective, do you think the most learning is done in the room or outside the room, and also how much can be gained from actually instructing?
Well, I think to be able to instruct the class at this level, you have to become a master of it. And one thing Crestron does for you to be the instructor of the class, they pick an area that you are not an expert on. So in order to teach the class, you have to know the material 2 to 3 times better, because you have to be able to ask the questions that come out of left field that you wouldn't necessarily think that would apply to that. So, one of the interesting things they do when you say, hey, will you come teach this class, is they take a topic that they know that you're not a master of, and you have to do the research. You have to do the backstory. You have to figure out the backstory. And you have to know how to, more importantly, just not tell it, but you have to know how to apply it. And I think that process there means that you have to learn so much more and so much diversity in it to apply that specific topic to the community. Because at the end of the day, our audience is certified programmers. And I think, where you gain the most knowledge there, it's almost split in thirds, right? There's obviously the time that you are in gathering the information amongst the colleagues, in the training class itself. But then there's the downtime when you're meeting with individual people and you're sitting down to grab lunch, and there's like Dave said, you strike up a conversation at a table. And the third thing is actually in the keynotes, the future roadmap of where they're heading and what's coming down the pipe, so you know where you need to sharpen your tools. So I think those are the three areas right there that you learn the most at.
So, John, I kind of wanted you to weigh in on this last. From your perspective and from Crestron's perspective, is this what you expect the attendees to be getting? And also, how from an instructor, or how even from a curriculum standpoint, do you go about really instructing an audience like this?
That's a fantastic set of questions. First of all, when we started this, the hope and goal was to create a mechanism by which we could keep the world up with what we're doing, right? Let's take the top levels and introduce ideas. So there's part of this is the feedback we get back. When you talk about drinking from a fire hose, right? You should see what it's like from our side of this whole thing. Yeah, this year we had better than 1,200 of you all feeding back, and all kinds of different feedback, of course, but like for what we should be doing. Are we in the right direction? The other part of it is what do we expect you guys to get out of it? Well, I think we were expecting to educate. I can't tell you, being from the very beginning of this, I never imagined, one, we'd have over 1,000 people at one of these things. Two, I never imagined the level of interactivity you guys have, the exchange of information, both from us and back to you in the class, but amongst each other. Just walking around, I learn all kinds of things. Stepping into conversations is really interesting because you pick up, it's like, oh, wow, these guys are really out there. And they're changing information, and they're doing it in a free form. From a curriculum point of view, man, that's become more and more challenging. And the beauty part of this whole diamond have to teach thing is it's allowed us, one, to expand what we're able to offer, but the challenges in the curriculum are, okay, we just don't have enough people. We got 1,000 subjects and 40 people. So it's one of those kind of challenges. It was coming up with a curriculum is something that you want to build over time. Like I use a lot of my class series, for example. If you attend my classes over 5 years, I always reflect back on those classes that I taught before because they were building blocks. They have to stand alone, but at the same time, you've got to be able to keep building the information of the programming community so they have more to feed on. That's really where those challenges lie.
Very interesting.
Well, and that's a huge point too, because if you look at Masters back in the day, in the beginning, it was a group of 30 to 50 of us in 2 conference rooms with a fixed set of topics. It was what John, you and team put together was what everyone heard, and you would go from year to year and you would pick up the content. And in the last number of years, when it's transformed to this idea of you can choose the topics that are appropriate to you. Having those levels of curriculum where there's the 101, the beginner class, the 201, the 301, having different levels of competency so that someone new coming into the group can get that same knowledge that we got 5-6 years ago because they haven't been exposed to it, and then also keeping it so that the most advanced person has the more advanced knowledge. It really is that curriculum concept has been what made it so valuable.
And also keep in mind the breadth of product and what the systems are doing now has grown exponentially in the last 10 years, 12 years. I mean, I could never imagine, the first continuing education was called when I went to the first one. The topics we're covering now, I could have never foreseen that we're doing that back then. I couldn't even fathom some of the things we do today.
I think there's a lot of value too in being able to specialize and be able to customize a class to a particular audience and be able to go deeper too. So I think there's a lot of value seen in that. Now, this year was a little bit different too, because we also had the design track, and that I think threw an interesting wrinkle in things, because if you were somebody who is maybe managing programming or managing programmers and had that certification, you had the ability to learn and be able to kind of get a different perspective on things rather than getting a little bit more in the weeds, if you will.
Well, I think that's great also, because you think now the ecosystem has grown so broad. Bringing the design community into this as well shows how diverse the Crestron ecosystem has developed over the years, and the different how large the footprint is, and the different types of systems that are there. Because now the ecosystem is so large, now there's specialties inside of the design that when it refers to the control system itself. So that just shows how diverse the footprint is at this point, and being able to specialize on where you need to be able to go is enormous, because now that the product offering so broad that you could actually have specialties inside the product family at this point.
Well, I would say, if you think about the designers, from a programmer's standpoint, if the design isn't right, how much harder does that make your life? So, introducing this idea that, not just a master programmer is important, but a master designer, somebody who really knows the ins and the outs of the equipment they're working with, knows the capabilities, knows how to stretch those capabilities, but also knows where the limits are and how to be careful around that. That's immensely valuable to me as a programmer, because it means that the designs that come across my desk might actually work better, might be closer to being possible, and I don't have to pull out quite as many of those miracles to get to pull something off. And so I think it's a great initiative.
And I think it's interesting now, because now you can truly say you switched the hat. I used to be the programmer. Let me sit in a couple design classes, and then now you can have the designer sit in a couple programming classes, and then at the end of that, you guys can compare notes. And that perspective from both sides really helps push systems forward overall.
Well, and a big thing to consider too, I mean, obviously when Masters started and what we've always been talking about lately, 20 years ago, control system programmers and control systems were part of the audiovisual system, right? As part of the deployment of AV services, completely different. 20 years later, we're now a greater part of the technology offerings that are going on in a residence or in a business. So it is a completely different landscape. And it was one of the big messages of Masters this year, is that with designers and with programmers, we're dealing less and less with dedicated control languages, in terms of, we're not using RS-232 as much anymore. You're not using relay as much. You're not using serial. You're not using analog voltages. We live in an IT world. And what opening up to designers, and in addition to the programmers, is the fact that we are becoming part of a greater technology market. And that it's important for us to see how we're integrating within that, which is established at this point. Even though it's a younger market, technically, it's a far more established and pervasive one. And so I think that it allows, in this situation, for us to learn how to better play with the other kids in the sandbox.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and for me, the designer track, which I didn't have anything to do with the creation of it, and I thought it was actually a brilliant stroke, because one of the things that we get back, or that I hear constantly from programmers as we say, hey, we need to do this, we have to do these things, is that it's not in the spec, or I don't get that language. So creating something that is a homogeneous environment by which everybody can hear, see, and speak the same language, to me, I think is completely worth all the effort and all the interchange. That, and I think demystifying our world to the designers and demystifying their world to us, having sat in both chairs, has absolute value to us as an industry.
I was going to actually kind of share one of my experiences in one of the classes was that the instructor said, hey, designers, the guy sitting next to you may be a programmer. If you have a question, ask them. And maybe you guys could work together, and this is a better way of doing things rather than designing and programming being two separate entities. So I'll kind of bring us back to the idea of certification, and maybe I'll start with you, John. So we have we have now veteran Diamond programmers. What's next? Is there something beyond that? And how does that certification look like to the outsiders? And I'm sure it has tremendous value to Crestron.
Yeah, myself and Jim Pope, who I'll mention being Jim Pope being the first, myself being one of the second ones, along with my august colleagues here on the phone. I think retirement. Sorry, kidding. The concept of professor emeritus. This is an important thing. I think at some point some of us have to age out, and that's just a fact, right? We have to make room for the up and coming. The cool thing about this whole tiered thing, and especially with the diamonds, is we can now begin to expand the breadth of the classes we offer based on demand, right? Because we have a whole bunch of new programmers, but then we also get the fact that some of us have been around for a while, and we've got to let the younger ones go. So we were joking that we're now referring to Mr. Pope as Professor Emeritus, which I think is a fantastic concept. I don't know what the next one will be called, but I think that there has to be a continuing level. But I also think that there has to be a point where maybe you move into a counselor type position, right? Letting the other people, because we can't keep taking up the time that other students need to be able to teach a class to get their certification. And there's a flood coming. Just look at the number of golds that we have that are coming up. Diamonds are starting to populate. We did 2 this year. I think we got another couple in Europe. So I think for some of us, I think the next level is becoming part of creating an upper level organization that helps determine that curriculum. That way the community is driving the curriculum. Crestron provides the space and the technology and the knowledge, but eventually you guys, the community, I myself as a member, we begin to govern what we're teaching and make sure that it's tiered, that it's not, I hate the word regulated, but consistent. You know what I mean? So that we know that a silver should learn this so that they can be successful at gold. And we know golds need to know this so that they can be successful at diamond. And hey, why haven't you taken your diamond? You've got the years in. Oh, it's the crowd thing that you've got. Okay, well, hey, let's get you through that whole crowd fear thing and get you up there. That kind of stuff. So I think that's what the next level looks like for those of us who are long in the tooth.
I like that, and it almost sounds like a sense of professional development as part of this maturation. Dave, I saw a lot of familiar faces, as you alluded to, and as John's alluding to. The age is getting older. How are we going to start to backfill? Because unfortunately, we didn't see too many unfamiliar faces.
Well, that's the key is, there's when we started this, the group of us who are, some of the gold and the platinum and the diamond, we started coming to this long before master's class was tied to certification. When we started coming to this, it was purely just about continuing education. And so now you have, I'll call it sort of a mix. Some people are there motivated by just the continuing education. Some are there motivated much more by the fact that it's tied into certification and it's part of that. And obviously everyone gets value from both, but everyone has a little different motivation for being there. And so, I think as we bring in and we continue to strive to bring, younger people into the programming community, as well as just advance those who are, who aren't yet certified or are just freshly certified, and advance them through and encourage them that there are benefits to it. It's a constant, challenge, because the other thing you've got is you've got different generations there. And and it's there it's a different ball game when you look at I'll call it the millennials, that there are some phenomenal programmers who are just out of college in their first few years of their professional career. But for them, I've talked to a number of them, they look at the diamond certification and say, I don't need that, because they can't even conceive thinking 10, 12 years down the road. They're just worried about what's going on right now. And so, it's a different mindset that they have. They'll still get a lot of value from the certification track, from coming to masters. But it is a group that we need to look at differently and consider that we have that group along with, I'll call Bernard and my generation, who, have been in this a long time. We're all looking to get the same value out of the program, out of the classes, but we have different ways of approaching it. And, it's a continuing challenge.
And I think that's one of the great things is by when Crestron put the Diamond program in place, now you have a pool of different instructors you can pull from to help target that audience as the need for different classes or curriculum come about. Now you have a pool of instructors to kind of switch it up. Because I think one of the interesting thing is when you have a Crestron representative in let's call it an integrator or CSP teaching a class together, the perspective from the manufacturer and the people who are in the integrator CSP to present the material makes it a really good topic to have conversations around, and that really broadens the audience at that point to help bridge that gap that you just talked about, Dave.
Well, the other thing I throw out in my classes personally is, and it's an approach that I've been really successful with, is approaching it as, hey guys, I don't work for Crestron. I'm here to tell you about the topic you signed up for, but I'm going to give you I'm not going to give you all just unicorns and rainbows. Certainly, I want to make sure you understand the product or the platform, but I'll also help you through some of the places where it might have challenges, because we unfortunately know Crestron's not quite perfect. Shh, John, I didn't say that, but there are times where things aren't perfect. And so, I, as someone who am in the field, you, Bernard, as well, I know do this. Here are some things I have found to work around challenges that you might have, so that not just am I doing a sales pitch on the product or the platform, but I'm really helping you better use it and better benefit from it in the field.
And I really think that helps broaden the audience at that point.
I also believe it validates the entire process, having you guys teach. Exactly to both of your points. That validation, here's the community. It's not Crestron pushing a line. It's you guys educating, and it validates what we're trying to do.
I would say, as far as the way things have been portrayed and how that information has been put out there, one of the things that I got some enjoyment out of is you guys sitting on a panel and basically talking is like we are here, and sharing both your thoughts and your experiences, and that was tremendously valuable, and it was a kind of a way of formalizing some of these types of conversations. So, Rich, I'm going to wrap it up with you. Moving forward, what do you think? How do you think the industry would best be served by these types of events? And is this something that is localized to only a big manufacturer, or are these types of conferences or something that you think we'll see more of?
I mean, I think we're seeing a trend to this for the past few years anyway. I know that, some other manufacturers have made that decision to say, we are opening up larger training centers in major geographic areas in North America and in Europe, and, opening out. I think that we are seeing how the scope and how our projects work together is changing. We see how technology is changing. We see how the workforce is changing. I think Dave brought up a great point. How do we keep engaged? And obviously the best way to keep somebody engaged is for them to be together, to experience being with like-minded professionals, creating professional development arenas, because you're going to get the most bang for your buck. That's always going to be it. from the business side, as a business owner, the flip side always becomes, how can I account for my staff being gone and either the lost opportunity costs or the project costs or everything that go along with it? Because there's also a reality, a brother's still got to eat, over and over and over, right? And what I love that Crestron has been actively working on, especially the past 2 years with Masters, is seeing that and with technology and saying, you maybe couldn't make it. Maybe it's not part of your certification path, but here's the information in the classes. So at least you didn't miss out on everything. And if nothing else, that becomes an opportunity with, like Dave was saying, a junior programmer who they may be in for 2 years at something. You can say, look, tell you what, you didn't see the value, but these are some very important things. And by the way, I want you to sit in on this course track. And that's a very powerful tool to be able to propel it to saying, okay, now we're going to make sure that you're there. So I think we're going to see more and more of it. I think that the technology and the ability to live stream, attend in various ways, obviously physically the best way, but recorded tracks. I mean, we're going, Professor John Otteson will be holding his live lecture class, for $11.99 each, just click and choose and PayPal directly. So, but I think it's going to be great.
Well, I think that's a good note to end on, and I appreciate everybody's input on this. It certainly was a very successful event, and I think we all got a lot out of it. So with that, first want to thank everybody for being on the show today. First, I'll start with Dave Hatz from AVI Systems. Thanks for being here. How can people get in touch with you, learn more about AVI, and continue the conversation?
So avisystems.com would be the best spot to head to. If you're looking for me, I'm sorry, but dave.hatz@avisystems.com. I'm on the tweets at DaveHatzAVI. I'm on LinkedIn and stuff too. But again, AVI Systems is really a much better spot to go than trying to find me.
You got it. Next, Bernard Morgan from ICS Plus. Thanks for being here, Bernard. And how can people get in touch with you and learn more about what you're doing?
The website's probably the best place to start at icsplusonline.com, or also you just email at info@icsplusonline.com.
Very good. John Otteson, thanks for being here today. I hope it was a good experience for you. I know that the audience, I'm sure, is familiar with you. They probably all have your cell phone number, but how would you prefer that everybody gets in touch with you?
Well, of course, Crestron.com. You can tweet me at any time at OtterXB. Yes, Otter the Critter XB. And of course, email JOTTESEN at Crestron.com. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. It was great. And last but not least, Uncle Richie, how can people get in touch with you, those that don't already know?
Obviously, Uncle Richie on the airwaves. You can find me at fregosadesign.com, on the Twitters at @Fregosa. Obviously here with my compatriot Steve. Also find me on some other AVNation shows, Resi Week being one of the other ones. But obviously, just type my name into the Googles and something might pop up.
Hopefully it's good.
Hopefully it's good. And if it's bad, it was John. Yeah, exactly. If you have any issues, at John Otteson at Crestron.com.
Well, thanks, everyone. My name is Steve Greenblatt. I'm glad you were able to join us today. To reach me, you can get me on social media at Steve Greenblatt, or my company Control Concepts at controlconcepts.net. But more importantly, check out the AVNation website, avnation.tv. You can get this show. You can get a lot of other complimentary shows, weeklies and monthlies. They're all great. And we're starting to see some crossover on some of these conversations. So I'm sure that you'll be able to fit right in and really get some more detail on the things that we're discussing. Also, please take a moment to leave a comment, leave a message, or rate us on iTunes. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to be able to share this show to more people. Lastly, InfoComm is coming up, and I have been getting a lot of social media tweets about the tweet up and also about AV selfies. So take a look and check that out. I'll be at InfoComm actually teaching a class on programming versus configuring what to know. So if you can be there and want to know more about that. It'll be on the Tuesday before the show, and I'd love to have you and love to meet some of our listeners. So with that, that'll be a wrap for today's show of A State of Control.